Hey, welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about timelines, timeline splits, karmic loops, karmic debts, pronoia, and the red pill trap. It's a lot to cover. So, thank you, all of you, for your warm and kind comments. I did see that my last video kind of triggered a bunch of crazy AI bot things, getting into the angels and demons thing. And this one is going to be a continuation of a video that I made quite a while ago when I was first kind of processing this idea of timelines that we're on. We live in a timeline and you can jump timelines, and there's going to be a timeline split. And there's two levels, in my opinion, to understanding these concepts. One is like, what does these words mean? Like, what are you talking about when you say a timeline? And that's kind of an academic exercise. Like, you're talking about a theory, like a concept. I find that it is often valuable to have a friend that you can talk these things out with, because it didn't make sense to me at first until I kind of worked through it. Then there's the theory, and then there's like, okay, well, I live in the real world. How do these concepts apply to like my everyday existence? And that takes longer, because the mind wants to only believe in things that it can see. And if you can see it, then it's real. So the mind has a hard time generally aligning with a lot of kind of spiritual concepts. I mean, what's funny is I get hammered on every video with some kind of person telling me to like take Jesus into my heart. I'm like, you realize like a lot of all the stuff that I'm talking about, Jesus's teachings align with it. So there is no conflict or contradiction. But in Christianity, there's this idea of the Holy Spirit. And I do like discussing with Christians, like, how do you know when the Holy Spirit is present? How do you feel? Like, how can you be sure you're feeling that versus something else? So a lot of religions, including Christianity, deal with understanding things that you cannot see, like the Holy Spirit, for example. And I think other religions, I feel like prana is one of them. I don't know where I just made that up from. But even kind of feeling the influence of angels and guides, it's difficult for the mind, because if you can't see it, it doesn't feel real. But if you dig into that argument, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because I can't see sound and I can't see smell, but I can, interpret those, and I know that something has a scent. Like, even though I can't see it, I know it's there. Wind is one of my favorite things to try to think about, which I don't know if anybody else. When you're outside and it's really windy, like, it feels like there's a thing like pushing you, but you push your hand through it, there's nothing there. You don't feel the resistance like you do in water. I mean, water is obviously fluid as well, and strong water can push you, but I can see water. I can fill a cup of water. Like, the mind doesn't question like what exactly is water, because it exists in this physical thing. But air is tricky, especially when air seems to push you. You're like, how does this thing that looks like nothing push me? It doesn't, it's confusing. And I think you get into a lot of these topics when you are digging into some of these more esoteric concepts about beliefs and what's going on in the mind. All right, so timeline splits. I have learned these things through the use of metaphors. And over the past couple of years, I have now become comfortable with the fact that I'm being guided by angels and God and spirit guides. It's not always clear what label to put on that, because you can't see them. They're like air in some ways, but I can certainly feel them. And now that I've like relaxed and I'm not as resistant to it, and I can now tell the difference between when I'm just doing something that's routine versus doing something that I'm being guided to do. Making videos, for example, is a great example of things that I'm often guided to do. I'll be tooting around in my regular life, and something is like, you need to make a video like right now. And I'm like, okay. So I recently started a podcast like 2 days ago, an audio one. And one of the reasons for that is there's often times where I'm guided to make content about something, to talk about something, but I'm just not in a convenient place to make a video. Like, it's late at night, and I don't want to turn all the lights on and get this like setup going, or I'm in the car. Like, there's all sorts of places where I'm not able to make videos. And I've passed on those opportunities. And my recent guidance has been like, that's kind of a weak excuse. Either figure out the video problem or find another way. And so I'm like, all right, well, Why do you need to sit here and see me talk? Like, I don't have any cool visual effects or slides or whatever. A lot of the content that I produce and share could easily be audio only. So I now have a complimentary podcast called The Courage Chronicles. It will be similar to this type of thing. It's just whenever I called to make content for that, it's probably because I'm in a situation where the videos are hard to make. So, but I'll still make videos as well. All right, timeline. So this is a continuation of a video that I made, I don't know, a year or so ago about timelines. And so the way I learn a lot of this stuff is through metaphors, because this is where I was going with my tirade before my little sidebar, is when I get these sort of downloaded information from my guides, like they don't speak English really. So they communicate to me in visualization things, in metaphors, and I can ask questions and they answer me, but sometimes they will describe a process to me using metaphors that we both understand. This is not a new concept. I mean, much of the Bible is teaching through parables and stories and examples, because we as humans have a hard time sometimes grasping these esoteric and spiritual and, non-tangible concepts, and we can understand them if they're told in a story. Aesop's fables, a lot of nursery rhymes. The Bible is a perfect example. All right, so I would taught this timeline thing about trains, that we are all people on trains, and these trains are running fast, and trains run on tracks. Now, as a human, you have different facets to your life. So you have different identities in the game, in the Matrix. So you would have an identity for, like, if you have a job and you go to work, then you have an identity that you are at home. And before that gets weird, realize, you're probably somewhat of a different person at work than you are at home, right? You talk about different things. You spend your time doing different things. Sometimes, let's say you're a very, assertive, salesperson, and, you are on it all the time. You might be very different at home with your young children because they don't want to, interact with sales guy. So we all have different archetypes or roles that we play in the game. And for each of these, in my view of this, you're on a different train. So everybody's on more than one train. And you often will have the same group of people on the same train. So for example, you'll have your work friends and your coworkers. And then you'll have, maybe you go to church. So you have a church train and all the people that you regularly see there. Then you have a home train and all the people in your family. And so you think about all these trains that you're on. And for the most part, your trains are kind of in the same speed and going on the same way. And you will have people in your life who can join you on more than one train. And your consciousness generally is only on one train at one time. I haven't really gotten beyond that because this is really just a metaphor. So when you pick apart the literal stuff, you miss the point. So, but you can have somebody in your family who maybe comes to a work event, and now these two trains have temporarily merged. You might also have friends. I had this sort of last year. I had a friend who I didn't interact with him in any other train. We just kind of, our trains would meet temporarily and then split. And that was kind of one of the ways that I learned about these trains, and that you can get on different trains. You can get on different trains with other people. Sometimes you're on a train for a long time. Sometimes you're not on a train for a long time. But these trains are always moving, and everyone's on a train. It gets a little messy when you try to think about even just 100 people that you know. You're all on these trains. You're on the same train with some people sometimes, but not all the time. And what is going to happen, according to a lot of people who've been teaching about this for a while, is there's going to be a timeline split. This is described in many ways, 5D, 3D split. Some people, I just had a conversation with my soul scan referring to the bifurcation event. And I have had this metaphor of these trains in my mind for a long time. And what I think is going to happen is that a lot of people are on these trains, and you can go back and forth between these trains very easily. But at some point, the lines are going to split, and that split is going to be determined by your life force energy or your vibration or your frequency. These are ways that we describe kind of your vibe and where you are on that scale of 1 to 1,000. Levels of energy and force versus energy, power versus force are several books, and there's lots of graphics on Twitter and places like Pinterest and Instagram showing that you can score energy from 0 to 1,000, where the 0 is like the lowest grief, rage, the darkest of dark energy, and then 1,000 is like the lightest of light, love, and there's all this stuff in between. And you can kind of evaluate, where are you most of the time? Are you generally kind of annoyed and pissed off? Are you generally just at peace? Are you generally optimistic? Are you generally all fired up and excited? And you get into this idea of having like a resting vibration or a resting frequency. And that is what part of ascending, in my experience, is you want to raise that. Now, there can be a fear response, like if anytime a negative thought comes into your mind, or you watch a scary movie, or you have a really crappy day, that all of a sudden now your frequency's tanked and all this, you're going to go on the lower timeline. It's not what this is about. This is about your resting frequency, that when all is said and done, you wake up in the morning, it's a clean slate. What do you wake up frequency-wise before the matrix messes with you in any way? And you can think about this as like your resting heart rate almost. And if you're into fitness stuff at all and you have tracked your heart rate, you can sort of see that the stronger your cardiovascular health, the better. And so these resting numbers, these resting scores are ways to track progress. Now, do you need to calculate what your score is each day? Absolutely not. Some people who really want to track this can keep a journal of sorts, where every morning when you wake up, you describe how you feel, and you could look at that and plot that over time. You could even come up with your own subjective scale, like I'm on a scale of 1 to 10. How do I feel today? 1 to 10 scales sometimes are flawed when you're comparing like what I consider a 7 to someone else's 7, because we might not do it the same way. But when you're tracking your own progress, if you have the same view of what a 1 to 10 means, then you can track that progress over time. And I'm going to make a bunch of videos about raising your vibration, because it has really turned into a passion of mine, and it has to do with stuff outside of you, like what you eat, what you drink, kind of what you choose to be around. Like I have a lot of flowers in my home now. Like I can't even, like, if I were to when I go to a town and I come home and there's no flowers here, like that's a problem. I have to go out and buy some and get them, because they really do affect the frequency and the energy of my home. And I now am so used to that if it weren't there, it would feel like something was missing. And there's a lot, and if I'm ever having a difficult day, or I'm working through something hard, there's a botanical garden thing near me that is, I think, the highest vibration place within an hour's drive that I have found, that whenever I go there and hang out there with the flowers and leave, like I'm in a completely different state. It has just a magical effect on me, which is wonderful. And I think not only is it a beautiful place, but it is just full of flowers. And if you think about flowers, they're so gorgeous and intricate that if you wanted to make an argument about like evolution and everything just evolving slowly from one single organism, the gorgeousness and intricateness of flowers is difficult to explain. That to me, the only real logical explanation is they are creations of God, and they're gorgeous and intricate, because when you are God, you can create anything without having to like show a process of evolution. All right, sorry, I'm going off on some tangents here. Back to the timeline. So you're on these trains, and your vibration determines which, like if you had to go through a checkpoint, like a toll, and they were to read your resting vibration at that time, there's going to be a cutoff. Now, I wouldn't get stressed about what that cutoff is, because then that's going to create this pressure, and you can't raise your vibration through force or pressure. It's like the harder you try, the worse you'll do. It's like swimming against the current. And the more faster you swim against the current, the stronger the current will be, because it will want to keep you at a state of equilibrium. So in order to raise your vibration, you have to just kind of relax and almost not really care. You make an effort, but you don't make a big deal out of it. One of the most influential books in my kind of awakening journey and ascension journey is called Reality Transurfing. It's quite a long book. I've actually read it twice, which is nuts. It took me, I think, a year almost to get through it the first time, because it's just long and it's dense, and I would read it and take breaks and that kind of a thing. But they really do teach you about manifesting and how the energetics of that works, and that the harder you try to get something, you like push it away. It's like chasing a butterfly. You will never catch a butterfly by chasing it, or a dragonfly or a firefly. But if you kind of sit back and relax, then it can come to you. And so the metaphor that they use in reality transurfing is with when you want to do something, and that could include raising your vibration or manifesting something, you have to look at it like going to get the mail. Like you're sitting at home, you make the decision, I'm going to go get the mail, and no one questions whether or not you're able to get the mail, or whether you're good enough to get the mail, or whether you're worthy of the mail itself. So you make this decision to go get the mail, and you don't waver in it, you don't agonize about it, and you just go out and you get it. Now, if something were to come along that were to delay your getting of the mail, then you would just deal with it and you wouldn't make a big deal out of it. But many times, and I've had this myself with trying to manifest things, especially things that you get like emotionally tied to, these things come up. Like if you, like I've been trying to manifest this plane for a while, and all these things always come up with the plane about, like, I don't know anybody who has a plane like that. So do people like me even get to have planes like that? And so these stories come in that will repel the plane, because my subconscious and my ego they're not in agreement that this plane is mine already. And so with raising your vibration, just decide you're going to raise your vibration, not make a big deal out of it. Don't stress about it. Don't be obsessively trying to evaluate if you're doing a good job. You just, like you go out and get the mail every day, you're aware of the mail. You don't get the mail if you don't make the effort to go out to check it. And so with raising your vibration, if you decide this is something I want to do, you just kind of do it, but don't stress about it or make a big deal about it. And if you forgot one day and you're busy with something else, you just pick it up again the next day where you left off. And there are internal ways that I think are far more valuable than external, but both of them play a role. And I'll get into the external ones, which are really, things like flowers and water and food and all that stuff. But the internal stuff is the bigger deal, which is the mind. All right, I had a point that I was going to make. Okay, so this timeline split is coming. It will be based on your vibration. Don't worry about it. If you're watching this video, odds are pretty, and this video is even making any sense to you whatsoever, odds are high that your vibration is pretty high and you're close to this, if not already far in excess of whatever this cutoff would be. If you're watching this video and you have no idea what I'm talking about and you think I'm crazy and this is the silliest thing in the world, you probably should just move on and maybe look for someone else to maybe guide you through this process. But the timeline split and raising your vibration all come down to this concept of life on Earth as having free will. And this is a great idea. I love philosophical debates with open-minded people. And one of my favorite ones is free will. Do we really have free will? If we kind of are living in this scripted metaverse where all the major things are determined in advance, and the story you want to live out is already written in advance, then what is free will all about? And again, this is not stuff that you can prove. And I don't ever like to discuss this with someone who's going to tell me I'm wrong and their view is right. Because I'm like, no one knows the answer to these questions. But by trying to discuss them in an open-minded way, we can figure them out and maybe make some progress. And this is why I do tend to get annoyed sometimes on comments on YouTube videos where people are so definitive that I'm wrong or that they're right. I'm like, we're all just figuring this out. The idea that you are so certain that your viewpoint is right just tells me that you have fear about expanding your view even more. So I am not married to any of these viewpoints. I'll probably make another video at some point, maybe updating some of them as I continue to learn and evolve. But to be open-minded is necessary to really figure this out. And so this idea of free will depends on how, so let's just say for argument's sake that everything is scripted and the story was written in advance and all these people who come in and out of your life, whether they're sort of good or bad, that was all determined. It was there to have you experience something. Then what is free will all about? Well, there is a school of thought that you're still going to go through and make the choices that you make, even though it's already known in advance, because you know what choice you're going to make. You're just living that experience now. And even though you're still going through this process of choosing, And in that moment, you experience what it feels like to make that choice versus the other choice. And has to do with aligning with this 3D, 5D concept, this scale of 0 to 1,000, and the ego versus the heart, the mind versus the soul, that there's this lower vibration, fear-based choice, and there's a higher vibration, love-based choice. And as you navigate through your own story, every time you come to a fork in the road, you pick one or the other. Now, for many of us, earlier in life, we more often than not picked the fear-based choice because we were in a scary world. We had to survive, and you did things to defend and protect yourself. And that often meant being defensive and guarded and skeptical and pessimistic because those were considered values by the ego that were necessary to survive. But then as you grow up and you have more experiences and you maybe even go through experiencing like your worst fear in life, and then you get on the other side of that and you're like, I got through it. Like, I guess I had that a couple of years ago. My worst childhood fear, I experienced it. It was devastating to go through. But then when I was on the other side, I was like, wow, oh, well, I'm still here. And now, like, no other fear that I have compared to that one. So if I got through that one, then maybe everything's not as big of a deal. And so it freed up my ego to start to make choices from a different place because it didn't need to be so protective and defensive because the stuff that I feared wasn't as bad as I had feared. I mean, this is the reality in a lot of cases. Like, what you perceive something to be is quite worse than what it actually is. Like when you think someone's mad at you or there's a conflict, often the perception of that conflict is greater than what it actually is. So when it comes to free will, if let's just say for argument's sake, it's all scripted in advance and you're going through and experiencing it, you then go through that process of making that choice and you can feel like you can understand what it feels like to make the love choice or the fear choice. And now you have a different kind of wisdom because when you start to make the love choices over and over, you're going to feel differently. It's going to raise your vibration and you're going to start to be a different person than the you a long time ago who used to make only fear-based choices, was only defensive, was only protective, was only argumentative, was only pessimistic. And now if you're on the other side and now you're kinder and compassionate, you forgive people more easily, and because you realize that like nobody knows what's going on in this game. We're all just trying to figure it out and survive, and that having compassion for people it's freeing. And then, but it brings up people want to get argumentative and about like the presence of evil and psychos and stuff. And we often can get distracted by people that we don't know in real life. So much of this is navigating your own journey and your own choices. And people will come into your life to mirror back issues you have that you have to work through and solve. And it's often the people closest to you who will trigger things. And if anything triggers you, to me, it's an opportunity for you to figure out, why are you so mad about that? Because you'll often see someone else like triggered by something that you're like, why are they making such a big deal out of it? It's not, I'm not upset about it. It's hard to understand why they're so upset. Well, that has triggered in them some kind of root fear that they have to work through and release so that thing no longer triggers them. So triggers aren't necessarily bad if you use it as an opportunity to figure out what cleaning do you have to do to make sure your house is in good order as part of this ascension process. All right, so free will means you get to experience this choice, and then you also get to experience what is the consequences of that choice. And so even though it was determined in advance, you're still living through it. You make the fear-based choice that will deliver a consequence, because there are laws of energy and laws of the universe, and one of the undisputable laws is that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, the cause and effect. With energy you put out is the energy you get back. These are all things that describe the same idea that like the choices you make absolutely affect the reality that you experience. And when you are consistently making fear-based choices, you're going to experience, the universe is going to give you more fear-based things to experience because it's not that smart. It thinks that's what you want. But, sorry, not that smart is not the right use. It almost like it's autopilot. Like it just gives you back what you put out. And if you consciously make the choice to embody more high vibration, more love-based choices, then you will get back opportunities to do that again. So if you want people to be nicer to you, you kind of start by being nice to all sorts of people, even if they don't necessarily, quote, deserve it. And then you'll find that the world around you shifts because you've now reset your algorithm to say, it's like a social media feed. Like the stuff you interact with is the stuff you get. So if you put out a lot of high vibration, kind, loving, optimistic energy, then you'll get back things that will mirror that as well. There is this idea as well that we have these kind of karmic loops and karmic debts, and these are problems we need to work through. I brought up the trigger thing. That is often something that is a teacher, and that if something triggers you and upsets you, it's an opportunity to figure out what's really going on there. Why are you so upset by this? Like, you've made it a big deal. It's not a big deal. You know that rationally, but something in you is upset. That's an opportunity to heal some kind of child wound. Generally, that's what those things are. And related to that is this concept of karmic debts. And I've looked at this two different ways. One is, you get back what you put out. So if you hurt people, there's really one fundamental ethical law, which is do no harm to yourself and to others. But if you actually do that, if you harm others or harm yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally, then there will be a karmic consequence for you. So if you're a jerk to someone, odds are pretty high that you will experience that jerky energy on the other side as the backlash from that. Now, sometimes those of us who can pay attention to this, you'll see the same kinds of relationships show up in your life, or the same kinds of problems. People will describe to you as, this always happens to me, or the same thing keeps happening. It's because they're in a loop that the same situation, the same ethical issue is being presented to them, and they are consistently making the poor choice. So the universe will give them that problem over and over until they learn what is the right choice for them and move beyond it and close that loop. Karmic loops are fascinating. And sometimes there's a belief that your ancestors can carry down sort of trauma and generational karmic loops and generational patterns. And it's up to you to close those loops, one, to protect your future generations, and two, to just stop this crazy business before it drives everyone nuts. The last thing I want to talk about, because I'm going to keep these videos kind of short, is this idea of the red pill trap. So as part of the awakening, when you start to learn that we were lied to about a lot of things, and I made some videos for a while on conspiracy theories like the Titanic and the other kind of Antarctica, things that we were lied to about. And it becomes tempting to just become obsessed with what are all the lies. Let's list them all. Let's make a video on every possible thing that they lied about. And that what ends up happening is you get kind of mad. You're like, this is annoying that they lied about all these things and they manipulate us, and this whole birth certificate business gets me fired up, and the fact that I don't want to be slave in their little trading thing, and I'm not doing that anymore. I'm sovereign. I'm not going to be a part of it, an asset of the corporation anymore. And the more you hang, and when you get into the XRP stuff, we spent a lot of time with ETHgate, and we're in the movie about ETHgate, and this anger that the SEC had done this, criminal thing, and we want them to pay, and there needs to be some justice for this. And the problem with that energy is you just end up kind of mad a lot. And as I said before, if you're sitting around mad about ETHgate, the universe is like, oh, would you like some more things to be mad about? Here you go. And if you're convinced that the cabal and the Illuminati, whatever, have been lying to us about things, and you're all fired up about it, the universe is like, oh, would you like some more things to be fired up about? I can easily arrange that for you. And you end up just manifesting into your reality more of these things that upset you. And that is what I call the red pill trap, which is once you kind of open that can of worms and you find all these sort of truths that are upsetting to have to come to terms with, if you hang out in that space too long, it poisons your energy and you end up stuck. Remember I said this timeline thing, you're on these trains, you don't want to stay in a lower vibration if you have the choice, if you can do something else. So for me, if someone were to ask me about the awakening process and what to me is the ideal way to go through it, I would go through that red pill chapter, find out about all the crazy things we were lied about, and then quickly move on and say, you know what, that stuff happened. It's in the past. I'm not going to get played again like I was before, but I don't need to sit around bitching about all this stuff that happened. Let's instead focus on, well, what's ahead? So when these systems collapse, these fiat money and these slave systems and the whole education system is lunacy, and mortgage industry and health industry, all these sort of crazy food production, all these things are going to collapse because they're all built on a bunch of lies and nefarious agendas. Well, when those things are collapsed, there's going to be a big void and we're going to have to replace some of the other stuff. To me, it is a far more productive use of my energy to focus on building the new systems than sitting around complaining about the old stuff. And this is why even Jimmy, the same thing, we're not really worried about ETHGate anymore. Like, I don't even care if there's justice at this point because it's an old story. Those people are kind of gone. And at this point, we got to focus on building the new stuff in the new future and the new systems because they don't exist. And if people like us don't step up to build them, then who's going to do it? Because a lot of the, quote, leaders, people we've looked at in government and the global elites, like they ain't going to be in positions of power much longer. So if people like us don't sort of chip in and do our part to build these new systems, then there is no one else to do it. Like, we can't, there's no savior to come and build all these things for us. And, people often talk about whether Trump is kind of seen as this savior to come in and sort of clean out the swamp. I think he's there to destroy a lot of the old stuff, but, and I am forever grateful to Donald J. Trump for his compassion and generosity to give so much of his time to fighting this battle. He's an older man, and I think that once he's done fighting, he really deserves to retire and just chill, and the batons will be passed to the next generation to do all the rebuilding because, he deserves a break after the relentless attacks on him and his family for so long. So if you're going through the red pill stuff and you're interested in conspiracy theories, just know that if you hang out there too long, it ends up having its toll on you and you get vibrationally damaged by hanging out in this place of frustration and anger too long. Instead, go through it, learn what you need to learn, and then let it go and move on and focus on the beautiful future that you want to build. And if you find yourself getting cynical and skeptical, which the red pill thing can make you scared that like the world is falling apart and going to hell, be like, all right, well, maybe it all, a storm can come through, clear out debris, but then the sun comes out the next day and beautiful flowers will bloom. Let's focus on what flowers we want to grow and what we want to build on the other side of this collapse, which, I don't think is going to be painful because I've chosen not to look at it that way. Like, it's necessary. We're going to get through it. I don't think it's going to last very long, but all of those descriptors are subjective. Like, who decides if it's painful? Who decides if it takes a long time? Like, those are not absolute truths. And so if I choose to believe that it's going to be quick, it's going to, we're going to get through it. It might be memorable, meaning we'll talk about it for a long time. So if it was truly pain-free, then it might not be that memorable, but it's a lot like, I think, people who live through a crazy storm or live through, we've been through other financial collapses. I think the 0809 one, which was engineered, took a long time by design, so a lot of things could collapse. I think this one's going to be more swift, like a hurricane that comes through and rips out and destroys a lot of old systems so that the new stuff can be built and be emerged. So, alrighty, I'll see you in the next one.